Say, what's lacking? In our current moment, most of us feel that our lives are lacking in deep meaning and purpose. Unlike past eras, our modern secular age has severed the ties that religion and traditional roles had in supporting our self-definition. The collapse of secular grand narratives, communism, nationalism, and progress, which emerged to replace religion and tradition, has also removed the source of meaning from people's lives. Previously, religions guided people and provided codified truths about life's meaning. After the Enlightenment, the individual became unmoored from this religious foundation, taking on the responsibility to create meaning and purpose through personal reflection and exploration. The stability of the religious blueprint about how to live life and its purpose gave way to the anxiety-inducing obligation to live in accordance with a discovered or yet to be discovered inner self. In a society without God, we are condemned to be free, agents of our own demise or glory. The God-shaped hole left in the wake of the Enlightenment was filled by large social and political movements. The Enlightenment begat both the liberalism of the American and French revolutions. The American one focused on the political ideals of individual liberty, property rights, tolerance, and the separation of church and state. The French Revolution included all of these ideas but made political nationalism a more central element to their cause. Nationalism, with its symbols of organic unity, common language, and origin, became central to individuals' identity. Communism and fascism were subsequent large-scale political movements that tried to offer an alternative to the liberal nation-states of the 19th and 20th centuries. Communism's critique focused on what it saw as the myopic individualism of liberalism and the material inequality that arose from it. To fight this inequality, collective ownership of the means of industrial production, as well as an alliance between workers worldwide, was called for. Fascism's critique centered on what they called the fallacious universalism of the liberal order, which ignored the particularities and essences inherent in different nations and races. The liberal nation-state became disoriented as it dealt with these two attacks, communists from the left and fascists, nationalists and traditionalists from the right. To combat them, liberalism incorporated aspects of both alternatives into their political system, the result being the modern welfare state. The welfare state today is a combination of liberal, socialist, and nationalist ideas forged from the struggle of all three movements. The failures and dangers of communism and fascism are well documented. The fact that individuals will turn away from grand historical and political projects after the 20th century is a natural consequence of its horrors. But the welfare state, with its many compromises and its more pragmatic and managerial approach to politics, couldn't foment the political fervor of its defeated political alternatives. In this context, people began looking inward and for the individualized solutions to the lack of collective purpose. I contend that this internal turn isn't the best response to the lack of collective meaning in our present moment. But if, as I've argued before, slackerdom and cynical disengagement from the world aren't the best solutions to our existential malaise, what is? Some have called for a return to religion in the West, especially Christianity and its teachings, although the viability of this response is precluded by the rationality genie being out of the bottle. That's to say, after the scientific and rational mindset has become naturalized, specific religious beliefs, for example the virgin birth of Jesus, can no longer be held as fundamentally true. This obstacle militates against the doctrinal conviction necessary for meaning from religion to emerge. Others, wanting to distill religions to their kernel of truth, call for a secular spirituality that condenses the best of all religious traditions, especially Eastern ones, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism. The proponents of this approach argue that if the individual is adrift because their inner self has been uprooted, then we can not just re-anchor but also transcend the self to a higher state of consciousness using meditation, mindfulness, and yoga. Access to this higher form of consciousness allows individuals to experience the world in ways that increase their well-being through awareness and appreciation of the present, and a decrease in suffering by severing their unhealthy attachments to the past and future. Another response to the current situation has been the return of virtue ethics. Virtue ethics focuses on the traits and habits that lead to personal flourishing and the good life. Individuals demonstrate virtue through the actions that, in their particular context, exhibit inherent qualities and ideals. For example, the classic ones of justice, temperance, fortitude, and prudence. Virtue ethics teaches us that we should strive to align our actions and intentions to our goals and projects in order to achieve excellence. These goals and projects should be in the service of fulfilling our ultimate purpose as individuals. Proponents of virtue ethics as a solution to our modern malaise deem it superior to the Eastern spiritual response because it is part of the cultural legacy of the West, unlike imported Eastern spiritual practices. The organic connection Western individuals have to the virtues as elaborated in antiquity, the argument goes, makes it easier for them to incorporate and apply. While personal virtue and meditative practices can alleviate individual modern alienation by cultivating personal meaning, these practices do not necessarily address the broader issue of social cohesion. Our task then is to find and develop ways of promoting collective solidarity and a shared sense of purpose without recourse to religion or an imposition of particular traditions upon groups. The best path forward, taking the constraints mentioned above as a given, is a shift in perspective where we focus on what's been gained after the collapse of the Ancien regime and the rise of modernity. From a longer historical view, the last 500 years can be seen as the birth and growing pangs of a new era, one that can only be fully realized if we recommit ourselves to its foundational concepts. A focus on the loss of the social cohesion of top-down traditional societies doesn't allow us to really appreciate the material progress of modern societies. This material progress has allowed individuals to experience a standard of living completely unimaginable in antiquity for the elites, let alone for the masses. The unprecedented enrichment we now enjoy is the consequence of classical liberalism's core principles: protection of private property, individual civil liberties, rule of law, individual equality under the law, laissez-faire economics, and constitutional representative government. Rather than lamenting the loss of pre-modern belief systems, we should be celebrating the gains made possible by classical liberalism. We need a rhetorical and narrative elevation of this ideology and what it's done for the world. To shift our perspective from what's lacking internally to the material abundance we take for granted is to make all of us more hopeful and optimistic. To recreate a strong social fabric without recourse to religion and pre-modern traditions, we must uphold and celebrate classical liberalism and Enlightenment values. We must at all times proclaim the virtuous synergy between the equality of individuals, political and civil liberties, free trade and the democracy of opportunity in markets, and commercially tested self-interest, and its effects on the material and moral progress of society. With these basic assumptions for equality, social mobility, toleration, respect for human dignity and autonomy, free trade and innovation, serving as the foundation, new communities can serve the needs of individuals to feel a sense of collective belonging. People will be free to aggregate and congregate based on mutual interest from ethnic and religious communities, tolerated as long as their fundamentalism doesn't threaten the liberalism that lays our golden eggs, to superficial ones based on hobbies and anything and everything in between. Now, armed with a new rational optimism based on the appreciation of our unprecedented modern progress, masses of individuals can pursue questions of meaning and purpose like never before, precisely because the question of material survival has been so categorically answered.